Did you see the stylish kids in the riot, shoveled up like monks, set the night on fire, wombos bleed, truncheons and shields, you know I cherish you, my love.
Welcome to the Young IPA Podcast. I'm James, this is Pete.
G'day, everyone.
It is the 28th of May, and this is episode 111. Sorry, we got a fun show for you guys coming up. I am back from the Friedman Conference, and I have a whole bag of goodies with me. I've got 6 interviews.
He's not a drug mule.
I'm not a drug mule, but I'm an interview mule.
Yeah.
I've come back across state lines. I didn't declare all my interviews at the border check, but we've got 6, so that'll be coming out over the next few shows. Today's going to be a good one, though. They're all good, but today's going to be a very interesting one with Andres Guevara, who was my roommate at one of the conferences that I was attending, and he works at Cedice, which is a free market think tank in Venezuela. So this guy is literally on the scene. Like, he spends his days in Venezuela around what socialism has done to that country, and he's still campaigning for free markets in a country where, you wouldn't get away with campaigning too hard for free markets, to be honest.
It's pretty tough.
Yeah, really inspirational guy. He's got a great story to tell. So, yeah, that's going to be talking a whole lot about what daily life is like inside Venezuela, what Young Guaido, the opposition leader, what the prospects are for him, and how Venezuela can get back on the right track. We're also going to be talking to IPA research fellow Kurt Wallace, who was also at the Friedman Conference with me. Now, I was off interviewing people. Didn't really get a whole lot of chances to watch any of the panels, hear from any of the speakers that were there at the Southern Hemisphere's biggest libertarian conference. Mm-hmm. Now, Kurt was at the session, so he's going to tell us about what some of the takeaways were, who some of the best speakers were, and who some of the worst speakers were. So looking forward to that as well.
He gave us his best on ground for the actual conference, but refused to give us the off-field best on ground. So
I don't know why you're so obsessed with figuring out who got the drunkest at a libertarian
if
conference.
If you're going to tune in for that and that alone, don't bother listening.
Do bother listening.
Yeah, seriously, listen.
Please, stick around. The rest of the show's okay. All right, let's talk about some of the big stories in the world this week. And I think we should lead off with the EU elections, which is some pretty big story. Now, the Brexit Party, they did pretty well, Pete.
They unsurprisingly did well.
Yeah, so they've only been around for a few weeks. This is the Brexit Party headed by Nigel Farage, the ones that were running for EU elections, that were going to bring Brexit back to the people. They were going to capitalise off the fact that the Conservatives can't seem to do anything about it. The results are in. The Brexit Party has claimed 28 of 64 seats in the European Parliament, mostly at the expense of the Conservative Party. Theresa May's party has gone from 15 MEP seats to a total of 3. Now, my first question, Pete, is that good?
In my limited political experience, James, he's not good.
Not good. Okay, so the Conservative Party finished in 5th place and is on course for its lowest vote share in a national election since they formed in 1834.
Ouch, that's
bad. Record. That is very bad. Interestingly, though, so Brexit Party, big winner, but when you hear the Conservatives did that badly, you think, maybe Labor did pretty well. Labor Party also aren't walking away with this one with their heads held high, because they lost a lot of votes to the Liberal Democrats, who have performed well everywhere as well. They placed second, 21% of the vote, and they got 15 seats. And every region in England and Wales has elected one Brexit Party MEP. Now, when the results were coming in, I had one thought only, which is how is friend of the show, Dan Hannan, going. Dan Hannan, being a member of the European Parliament, being a member with the Conservative Party, I want him back in there. Luckily, he's in.
Well, 2 friends of the show have been elected MEPs.
Because Nigel Farage is also a friend of the show.
We rubbed shoulders with some pretty powerful people, James.
Well, we didn't rub shoulders with Nigel Farage. We had a secondary shoulder rubber with Gideon Rosner, but friend of the show. Pretty stunning takeaway, Pete.
Look, pretty amazing. It's no surprise that the major parties haven't done very well, because even though I don't like polls, I like polls that I agree with, and the polls that I agree with...
Been consistent on that. There's one thing Peter Gregory likes. It's polls that confirm biases.
Yeah, exactly right. And those polls did confirm my bias, and it did actually turn out to be broadly correct. It's not a surprise. Great effort from Hannan, as you said, pretty symbolic, because, as theoretically Britain is still going to get out of the European Union. So, hopefully a lot of these people don't actually have to do that much work, but obviously a massive protest vote. Yeah,
it's almost as if you don't have a clear policy stance on Brexit, you're not going to do well in the European elections, because the Conservatives are trying to find any possible compromise deal. None of them is working, so they lose everything to the Brexit Party, which, it's in the damn name. We will deliver Brexit.
Yeah. And
then Labor lose all the ones to Liberal Democrats, because they're caught between, do we back a second referendum or do we bring Brexit, because a whole lot of Labor voters did vote to leave.
That's right.
And so when the Liberal Democrats are like, we want Remain, they get off that.
That's right. Yeah, Liberal Democrats, of course, did really well in this.
Yeah.
Look, I'm glad it happened. Sometimes politics, I've discovered in the last few months, is a bit like football.
Oh, really?
It can be good.
They say that sometimes.
It can be good when you just watch. Sometimes it's good to watch a team you don't mind beat a team that you hate, even if your team's not winning.
Yes.
So that's my take.
I'm glad, because you're going to have to get used to that last part. Anyway, let's talk about Europe as a whole. So, the EU elections take place all over the EU member states, and some pretty interesting returns as well. So, basically, for people that don't know a whole lot about EU politics, I envy you. I wish I didn't know as much, but anyway, so the Grand Coalition of centre-right and centre-left in the European Parliament, they're going to lose their 40-year majority. So it was basically these two parties that were, in cahoots together, just being pretty pro-Europe.
Official term.
In cahoots, yeah. And they collectively lost over 80 seats. They lose their majority. In France, Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally Party, they're prepared to take top spot in the country as well. Emmanuel Macron has only, he comes second. So, pretty concerning signs out of France about if you wanted to stay in the EU, then that's not looking too good either. In Germany, Angela Merkel's Christian Democrat Union, the centre-left Social Democratic Union, could be on course for their worst ever result at European elections. The Green Party being the big winners over there. So it's like, it's not exactly like Europe revolting against the EU, but it is the centre, the traditional power parties are going, they're hurting right now.
Yes.
So people on both sides are not happy with the status quo. You're either going further left or further right.
Yeah, it's a continued thing that we've seen across the world, really.
Yeah.
Just the revolt against political elites.
Yeah, the populism on both sides seems to be the takeaway.
Be interesting to see what unfolds.
Indeed. All right. And one thing that has unfolded with it is the fall of Theresa May.
That's right.
We go now to Peter Gregory with the story.
The completely unexpected resignation of Theresa May happened as Tory leader for the 7th of June, happened earlier this week. Her voice cracked as she spoke of the honour of serving the country that I love. I'll just summarise some of the mistakes she made as outlined by Tom Slater in Spiked.
Hey, the show's already a bit long.
She lost her majority in 2017 after calling the election. She buckled to every EU and elite Remainer demand. Brussels set the timetable for talks, ringing them in their own favour, etc., etc., etc. So it goes on and on and on. Look, I found the one thing I liked written about Theresa May, we put in Hay back in April by Theodore Dalrymple. He wrote in City Journal on that week that UK Prime Minister Theresa May was typical of the class that has gradually attained power in Britain. Unoriginal, vacillating, humourless, prey to the latest bad ideas, intellectually mediocre, believing in nothing very much, mistaking obstinacy for strength, timid, but nevertheless avid for power. So he didn't miss Theodore Dalrymple in that piece.
I object to humourless, because I'm sure we all remember that interview where Theresa May said when she was a girl she used to run through farmers' crops, and if that's not hilarious, I don't know what is.
Well, yeah. He's got that. He's clearly got that wrong.
I really disagree with humourless. She sounds like an incredibly fun person to be around.
I don't think that gets enough press. I mean, that for me is the worst of the lot.
I would have resigned on the spot. They go, so if people don't know what this story is, so basically Theresa May's being interviewed, and it's like, look, you're pretty perfect in that kind of sense. Like, what's the worst thing you've done? And you just think your standard answer is like, oh, got kicked out of a few bars when I was in the early 20s.
A few.
Well, Pete's got a sorted past. And Theresa May just comes out and says, when I was a schoolgirl, I used to run through farmers' crops, and they got pretty upset about that. Yeah, that is the richest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Farmers' crops. Anyway, so yeah, that's the end of Theresa May. That, I kind of go, I don't like seeing people fail, but just, wowee. Imagine going in history as just the one thing you were supposed to do, you didn't do it. You had 3 years to get Brexit done. You're the Brexit Prime Minister, and you couldn't get it done. That's just your epitaph forever. Yeah,
exactly. And she had this massive opportunity, as you say, for economic renewal and political renewal, and she didn't take it because she never really wanted to leave.
Literally every history book that gets written about this era, anytime anyone learns about this era, it's going to be Theresa May who failed to deliver Brexit. That's going to be the sentence. Yeah. It's pretty rough.
Yeah, it is pretty rough. And as, there's a lot of people that are going to have thrown their hat into the ring for the leadership. You think our leadership battles are bad. There's literally about 12 people here that it seems like have said that they'll go for it. So
until we've got 22, you're nothing on the Democratic Party over in the US.
That's right.
So keep going. Throw your hats in the ring.
It'll be interesting. I mean, I don't know which one of them I don't understand. Can't Han be leader? Oh no, he's in the wrong. He's not actually in the. But they should change the constitution so he can be. I don't have a constitution. So
how cool would that be if we had a friend of the show be
that would be
Minister
good
of the UK?
Imagine that. We'd demand an interview every week.
I think Boris Johnson is pretty heavy favourite at the moment, but as we're recording, we don't know what it is. So hopefully by next week's show, we can start discussing what all that's about. So I guess we'll bring it back to Australia for another leadership challenge. So the ALP. Bill Shorten has resigned as ALP leader after that loss, and it is going to be Anthony Albanese. No one else has put their name forward. Pretty interesting. My theory has always been if Anthony Albanese was leading at the last election, game over. Like, Anthony Albanese would be Prime Minister right now had he already been leader.
Really?
So
what is that based on?
Just like... My overall theory being that every election has come down to who would you rather share a beer with, and Anthony Albanese is number one in a heartbeat, like
above Bill Shorten,
and above Scott Morrison, I would say.
He used to have those segments on Sunrise, where he's pretty funny.
He
strikes me as pretty funny.
Didn't watch. Anyway, so Anthony Albanese, the new leader, comes from the Labor left faction, which is going to be interesting because, the main takeaway from that election being Labor went a bit too left. So now that Anthony Albanese's in there, it's going to be interesting stuff.
They're dominated by hardcore capitalists, the Labor Party. So now
if there's one thing, they were too big on traditional energy sources. Too big.
They can swing back to their traditional heartland.
Yeah, so going to be very, very interesting. There's been a lot of... So basically, Richard Marles, who looks like he's going to become new deputy leader, was speaking to 3AW yesterday, and he says they need to connect with their base, being people who put on overalls, go to work, get dirty, come home. They know what they want. They need them to know that Labor is their party. So that does sound like they're going to, go a bit more right wing. Yeah,
look, I sort of got this comment here that if you look at the establishment after they've copped, a defeat in the US and the UK and now in the EU. We've complained on this show about how slow they've been to respond to that and to actually maybe reconnect with their traditional heartland. But that statement you just read out, and the statement that Albanese made as well, which I won't bother reading through, but it suggests that maybe they are going to go for that reconnection with their traditional voters. And it would be great if Australia could lead the world in that regard.
Yeah, Richard Marles has also asked in this interview, he regretted previously saying the collapse of the global market for thermal coal was, quote, at one level, a good thing. He says, the comments I made earlier this year were tone deaf, which I didn't think until the election, but now I'm quite clear
but at least
tone deaf.
At least he's admitting that.
At least he is admitting that.
At least he's not saying that everyone who voted for ScoMo is a racist idiot.
Yes, that's a good one. And, I'll point out, Pete and I don't, at the end of the day, Labor or Liberal isn't the biggest thing, as long as, whichever party is in power is delivering good policies,
That's
affordable energy and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So, it's not a whole lot of look at Labor, look how they suck. It's more just hey, maybe you guys can start thinking of good policies, and then we're not in this issue.
That's right.
All right. Some people that aren't thinking of good policies, Pete, is the die-in.
The die-in,
yeah.
I won't say what.
Sit-ins don't push the needle anymore. You need a die-in.
You need a die-in. I won't say the first thing that came into my head because it's not appropriate, but more than 1,000 people have marched.
Save it for off-air.
Yeah.
I want to hear what that was.
Okay. More than 1,000 people have marched through Melbourne CBD last weekend and staged a die-in for climate change. The protest started with speeches at Victorian Parliament. Then marchers moved through the city to the corner of Burke Street and Swanston Street, where they had their die-in. One of the protest organisers, Extinction Rebellion Victoria, who are the mob from the UK, called for governments to set up and this sounds like an absolute, riot, Citizens Assembly on Climate and Ecological Justice to lead environmental party policy. Where do I sign up to?
How much money do I have to pay you to sit at that whole session?
Oh, I'd go for free, mate. That sounds like an absolute, a great time.
A hoot and a holler.
I can't think of the thing I'm trying to say. Anyway, this spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion said, it's kind of a snapback rally in response to our feelings about the election. We organised it within a week and we're really impressed with the turnout, he said. So, doubling down.
Yeah, the one thing I think about when I hear stuff about this protest where it says it started with speeches and then people got to walk to the die-in.
Yeah.
I've never been to a protest. What do you reckon the speeches are like? Are people receptive or are they just going, can we skip past this part? We all agree with you. We know what you're going to say.
Yeah. I've been to protests at sort of observed protests at uni.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of yelling and then just
Yeah.
I mean, the speeches are
the protest, the speeches go down okay?
Well, I mean, depends. Martin Luther King at the Lincoln Memorial was pretty good.
But that's not exactly a protest.
It was definitely a protest.
Well, yeah, but not in this traditional sense of it's not like this die-in where everyone's can we just go to the part where we get to lie down in the middle of a street and take selfies?
That's right. Look, maybe
And I want to call, like, I'm not like equivalizing Martin Luther King with a bloke with a crumpled up A4 sheet of paper on Victorian Parliament.
Mate, we're going to be extinct soon.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, history will prove how good this guy is.
So you're saying...
But until then, he's no Martin Luther King.
So you're saying people were going, come on, mate, let's get to the dying.
Yeah, you know, I just like, if I'm in a protest and I see the next speaker, you know, fumble through at least 3 different A4 sheets, I'm just going, geez, this is going to be rough.
Come on, let's get to the dying. No,
Yeah,
so...
it's like the 21st salute that goes on a bit too long. I'd rather go back and drink.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I can see how you mean. But I mean, the thing about this is, it's like we're not going to change our tactics, which are clearly on the nose with the general public. We're going to, you know, what we're going to do? We're going to have another protest.
Yes,
but I want to talk about a protest in Queensland, in Rockhampton. More than 100 people gathered, according to the ABC. So it's probably more than that, for a day of action demanding the Galilee Basin.
Mainstream media.
It's a bloody conspiracy. Gathered for a day of action demanding the Galilee Basin be opened up to mining to create jobs. That was way down the page after the story about the die-in, but equally as important. So there's that.
Well, yeah, so that was, you know, basically pro-mine, pro-Adani, and Adani does seem to, like, you know, we're looking like we're in the final stages. You never quite know, but it does seem to be. So Adani's latest environmental approvals are set to be finalised within 3 weeks after the Queensland Premier called for the process to be resolved. So if given the green light after this, Adani could begin breaking ground at Carmichael's site within weeks after more than 8 years of planning. You know, there's basically been the whole thing about the black-throated finch and, you know, what things can be done to protect that species. Yeah. And that's been holding up the mine. So it does seem to be... on the verge of being passed. Now, Pete, so Anastasia Palaszczuk, Queensland Prime Minister, Queensland Premier, has always been, you know, basically okay with the hold-ups to Adani. Now, what could possibly have happened recently, do you think, that would have made her go, this needs to be resolved right now?
I can't think of a single thing that's changed in the last few weeks.
But she does seem to have changed her mind for some reason.
And it's an unbelievable turn of events. It's certainly not the election, because no politician has ever...
sold out their previous views for electoral gain.
They've got no sense of self-preservation, politicians. So
she was fed up apparently with the ongoing delays. Just something about it was like, we need to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
All right. So that is good news because like Australia's got some of the highest energy costs in the entire world, which is wild considering all of the resources that we're sitting on. So hopefully once this mine gets underway, we can have more people be able to afford energy a bit earlier.
And people in India that don't have electricity at all.
Indeed, that we need to definitely think about that because, you know, like that's a country that desperately needs electricity.
What's your plan?
What is your plan? All right. So go over to ipa.org.au if there's a whole lot of other stuff you can read other than me and Pete. So you've got John Roscombe in the Australian Financial Review giving his post-election analysis, talking about the 5 ways that Morrison can put aspiration into practice. Basically, his idea is, look, the Liberals are apparently very good at politics. They're not so good at policy, which, you know, is something that we've observed time and time again over the last 6 years.
Yep.
But they've got the new 3-year lease and they have been given a pretty clear sign by the electorate. They do want some of these policies put in action. So Don is talking about how they can do that. You've also got Evan Mulholland in The Spectator Australia. You've got last week's Looking Forward podcast. Head on over and download all of those and read them and listen to them with the Looking Forward podcast. Make sure you're subscribed on any of the platforms that you currently subscribe to. Make sure you're telling your friends and family about it as you tell them about this show. So, you know, get the word out. Best way to grow a show is through word of mouth. So, you know, if you are listening, if you are enjoying what Pete and I talk about, go out and tell people.
Even if you're not enjoying it, even if you're just not disgusted.
I don't think anyone could possibly not enjoy what we talk about. So I don't even want to engage with that idea. Anyway, keep talking to people about it. If you are listening through iTunes, make sure you leave us that 5-star review. It really helps us out in the rankings. You can also leave a comment for the show, maybe a tip or whatever it is. But yeah, keep doing that. And if you are not a member of the IPA and you do want to support our work, maybe you hear from Kurt Wallace later in the show, you want to give that guy some help. Kurt specifically. No. But like the IPA does a whole lot of cool things. So make sure you're signing up as a member. We've got 3 different membership packages. Go to ipa.org.au/join. You can join, and become a part of Australia's community for freedom. And if you are already a member, and there's also the option to donate some money. So you can go do that as well. All right. So we've got Andres Guevara from Cedice in Venezuela. Awesome interview out of the, I will say, the loudest hotel room in the planet. Good hotel. Thank you to Atlas for booking it. But Man, oh man, I don't know what it was, but the second we started recording, Sydney just lit up outside our hotel room. So if there is some background traffic, I do apologize. But you can definitely hear what Andres says, because really interesting guy, really interesting situation. So we got that, and then we got Kurt Wallace.
Cool.
Okay, we are now joined by my roommate here at an Atlas conference. Hopefully this goes out. This is my first time using a portable podcast equipment, so, look, we're all hoping for the best here. But so I'm joined now by Andres Guevara, who works at Cedice down in Venezuela. So this is going to be really cool because you have a lot of listeners here, obviously a lot of listeners from Australia, who have absolutely no idea what life is like in Venezuela and the work that you guys do. So first off, thanks so much for coming onto the show.
Well, thank you a lot, James. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to share my experience in my country with you and your audience.
Yeah, excellent. And we're also experiencing, we're sharing a room here at this conference. We've got the 2-bed setup. It's quite the nice hotel room. So first off, what are your thoughts on sharing the hotel room?
Well, it's an interesting thing because, I never realized that the first time that I was going to be here in Australia, I was going to share the room with a local guy from Melbourne. So it's very, interesting because thanks to you, I have learned a lot of what is your culture, the difference, on your cities and the Australian culture. That is very, at first sight, it seems to be very complex with a lot of heritage and historical values. So, it's not like everyone has this opportunity to be here and to share this kind of experience with you guys.
Yeah, so, there's like the life in Australia here, and then there's also life in Venezuela. So you were telling me a lot about life in Venezuela last night, which was just incredible to think about. So, and I said, it's just so hard for an Australian to put themselves in your shoes. Stuff like you were telling me, like so much of the country is now controlled by rebels. So it's so hard to even tax people in Venezuela because no one uses a national currency. So what is daily life like in Venezuela? Like, how would you describe it?
Well, that's a very good question because when you come from a functional country, you may think that what is happening in Venezuela is like a science fiction history. And as a matter of fact, it's not. Regretfully, what is happening in Venezuela is the evidence that socialism doesn't work and doesn't work at all. And of course, when you try to plan all the life of individuals in every aspect of your life, it's not like you're going to raise one tax and that's it. No, when you try to plan as a whole by the state and from the state, the individual life, then you realize that your country become totally dysfunctional. And this is very important because when you try to summarize what is happening in Venezuela, yes, I can tell you about the rebels that are controlling the south part of the country, and they are like only worried about the purchase and sale of gold, of the blue gold, coltan, about the fact that no longer the security forces are capable control this part of the territory. But at the same time, I have to tell you about the crisis that we're facing regarding health conditions, about the economical situation, about the immigrants that are flowing away the country, not only to South America, that is perhaps the most popular destination, but also to Europe, and even in Australia, you had an important community of Venezuelans that are running away the country. So yes. And summarizing all these issues is not easy, but the truth is that what you see in news, is only a small portion of the reality, because due to censorship, due to persecution, and a lot of conditions that even foreign journalists are facing, it's very complex to describe what is happening in Venezuela nowadays at present time.
Yeah, so I want to get into the work that Cedice is doing and maybe some of the work that other journalists are doing as well. But you were telling me last night how hyperinflation has got to the point where just no one even uses the local currency anymore, which just in turn just brings the whole country to its knees. You can't get taxes, the government can't get funding for anything.
Yes, it's ironic. This because I know that many people here, we are at the Atlas Network and at the World Taxpayer Association, like fighting and advocating against, the payment of of taxes. But it seems to be very, very logical and reasonable if you take into consideration that taxation, I mean, even the constitutional right of taxation without representation is a very important standpoint in many cultures of the Western Hemisphere and into certain countries that defend the state, the existence of the rule of law. However, because of the specific situation that Venezuela is facing at present time, we must mention that we are facing the most high hyperinflation of recent times of Western history, and perhaps is one of the biggest of all time, if it's not the biggest of the modern times. So what is happening, or one of the conditions that these generate, is that the Venezuelan bolivar, that is the local tender currency that we had in our country, is no longer being used by Venezuelans and citizens that are living in the country, because it doesn't have any use. I mean, you have to use it because to certain payments or obligations that the state obeys. But from a practical standpoint, most commerce, merchants, entrepreneurs employ American dollars or foreign currency as the Colombian peso in the boundaries between Colombia and Venezuela, specifically in the zone of the Táchira state, Zulia state, and I mean all the states that are next to Colombia. But the Colombian peso and the United States dollar, they swift the use of the Venezuelan notes. And this is a very funny issue because I was mentioning to many people that is interested on the Venezuelan situation that even the 1 bill note is not being accepted in the state of Zulia because it no longer provides value for Venezuelans, because the settlement of prices of goods and services within the country is being also modified in foreign currency because of the instability of the monetary policy within our country. So given this complexity, then you are not longer able to get to the tax administration and declare the taxes that you must pay. This is, of course, the two main taxes. That is the income tax and the IVA. That is the add tax value, the VAT, the value add tax, right? So we are no longer declaring taxes, and of course, the income of the government has lowered and has been substantially affected because of this and because of the sanctions that the government of the United States has enacted against our state-run company PDVSA. So I know that it's a complex matter, but in summary, yes, I mean, we are no longer able to pay taxes because, I mean, from a practical standpoint, the collection of taxes by the government is no longer a possibility because people are no longer using Venezuelan bolivars.
This is a wild thing for me, is that you talk about the health crisis, the money crisis, the government can't do anything, but Venezuela wasn't even invaded. This isn't like a country that should have failed, and so many of your bordering countries are quite rich. This is a country completely undone by socialism and by its own government.
Yes, and if you want to quote me on this, please feel free, but...
That is, yeah, the microphone is here. I want to quote you.
Yes, no, but listen to this. I mean, socialism is more powerful to destroy than a nuclear weapon, right? I mean, this is very important because, as you mentioned, we are not facing any kind of war here, and we don't have like rebels against someone in the country. I mean, of course that we have people that is like controlling territories, but it's not like they're trying to withdraw the government by force. I mean, they are controlling the territory because organized crime, I mean, is in control and in charge of certain aspects of the daily lives of many people. And since the government is not capable to set force, I mean, they have the control of the territory. But this is not like you're facing an invasion, a military intervention of a foreign superpower. No, it's just the collapse of a nation that has enacted and came into force a lot of policies that are based on the central planning of the economy. So that's the reason why I believe that, I mean, this kind of policies, socialism, is more destructive than a nuclear weapon. Because, I mean, there is no one single aspect of human life in Venezuela that may have not been affected because of the policies that we're facing. And this is crucial to understand, because I mentioned you health, education, but there is also, for instance, the ultimate crisis that we faced on March of this year regarding electricity and supply powers of energy. And there are cities in Venezuela that only have 3 hours a day electricity. So this is, for instance, the case of Maracaibo, that is Venezuela's second city. I mean, it's like the Melbourne of Australia or something like that, so you can realize the importance of what is happening. Maracaibo is one of the state oil-run and most important cities in our country. And since we don't have enough electricity to process oil and turn it into gasoline and gasoil, we're no longer able to have enough gasoline in the country. So the country is running out of gasoline and it's running out of oil. And it's ironic because Venezuela is well known as a petroleum and an oil and gas producer. But because of the nature of the system that is within us governing all the system, all the structure, we are no longer able to produce the mains of what we have been, of our essence in the economy. So we are talking about a tradition that many years ago, Venezuela was like one of the main top producer of oil and gas in the nation and the worldwide. So right now it's no longer like that. So if you don't have gas, if you don't have electricity, if you don't have power, life becomes very difficult to understand because you lack of meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that did come up at the start of this year was the rise of Juan Guaido. Am I pronouncing that right?
Well, it's Guaido.
Guaido.
It's like, Hermione in Harry Potter that says Leviosa, no Leviosa.
All right, fair enough. I will take the comparison to Hermione Potter.
Okay.
Anyway, so his rise was quite interesting for the world. It was like, okay, this is someone that could possibly take down Maduro. This is possibly someone that can bring Venezuela up. What's the view of Venezuelans towards him?
Well, this is another complex question because for many of us, Juan Guaido represents the legitimate power of the executive branch right now because of the specific situation that the country is facing. Juan Guaido, he is a very young leader. He is arising from the Social Democrat Party Voluntad Popular, and he is deemed for the free world as the legitimate president of Venezuela. Guaido right now is very complex, the role that he has to face, because more than a president that can at this moment execute public policy to transform the country, he has to lead a transition, or at least this is his mission. And it's not a complex one. It's not an easy one, because there are many issues that you must take into consideration in order to obtain a successful transition in Venezuela. Many attempts have been made since the beginning of this year regarding this issue. However, as we already, as of the time that we are holding this interview, regretfully, Maduro remains in power as a de facto ruler, but he remains there. And of course, the challenge that we had right now, Juan Guaido has, is to face that transition. Is Juan Guaido a guy that believes in free markets, that he believes in the rule of law and the enforcement of a limited government? Right now, it's difficult to tell, but I will assure you that he's leading to democracy. And in Venezuela, in the context of the Venezuelan situation, a leader that is envisioning or aspiring to get back to democracy is a winner. Because, of course, free markets are important. The rule of law is a cornerstone for development and for civilization. But at the same time, in the conditions that Venezuela is facing with this de facto ruling of all the situation that I have described, a guy that is trying to get back to democracy, it should be taken as a positive guy. For the future, Guaido or the next president may try to improve and to employ free market solutions for the country. It is possible, yes. Why? Because due to the reality that we're facing, it is obvious that only a free market policies and only free market solutions will bring back prosperity to Venezuela. Venezuela has many challenges regarding its economical situation, because first there is the inflation subject, but this is not only the inflation subject. You have to regain production. You have many undercapitalized or subcapitalized companies that need to get back to work, and they need like foreign investment. You have to restructure your debt. Right now, the debt in Venezuela, the foreign debt in bonds, in accounts payable, the PDVSA accounts payable, the PDVSA bonds, the sovereign bonds, is up to $180 billion. So this is a debt that has to be restructured. And there is like a general agreement or a covenant, a general agreement that this debt has to be restructured. And Plan País, that is like the guide or the roadmap that the opposition is trying to employ when effectively it gains again the control of the democratic government. It recognizes the importance of private property, rule of law, and of course free market as a cornerstone towards development. So in the medium and long term, I believe that it is possible that Venezuela may, and I would like to underline the word may, because nothing is for sure in our country, may get back to the economic development. And you can talk in a few years about the miracle in Venezuela, such as in the past you have been talking about the Chilean miracle or the German miracle, because it is possible from an historical point of view. I mean, it has the potential. Venezuela was one of the wealthiest countries only about 5 decades ago, so it's not impossible to think again against that. I mean, it can become once again a beautiful and a wealthy country.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the work of Cedice, which is the organization you work for. Now, you're a free market think tank in Venezuela, which is not a country where it's safe to be a free market think tank, I would say. So what is the work you do, and how do you go about doing it without getting arrested?
Well, that's a very good question, because many people is worried of our safety. Of course, each time that you try to express yourself in Venezuela freely, you're risking yourself. Most in the latest day, because it's not like you live in a free country, and the regime of Maduro is like they don't care about anything, because the main purpose of them is to remain in power, regardless of the means in order to obtain that goal. So, Cedice, we are conscious of this, and we're trying to promote the battle of ideas, and always do not attack direct. We try to not attack directly the regime of Maduro, because the consequences are obvious. I mean, but instead we try to defend like principles, general principles that we believe that surpass the mere fact of Maduro's regime. So basically, right now, of course, there's also the issue of the resources. What we try is to provide academic and scholar support to youngsters in universities, college, and in the communities. So it's more like a work that is oriented to grassroots, to communities, to that kind of people that is not directly like politically exposed. So this, to a certain degree, diminish and reduce the possible impact against the regime, because we are not fighting an individual. I mean, it's not like Cedice is actively blaming against Maduro or blaming against the Venezuelan government, but is blaming against socialism. And this is very, very logical if you see it from the commitment of Cedice, because Cedice was founded in 1984, so it has more than 35 years of existence. So when you take a look of the whole existence of the institution, you see that you are not only fighting socialism from Maduro and Chavez. Instead, you are fighting the interventionism of the state many decades ago, because this problem is not new. Of course, it has been more bold and more difficult in the recent times. But I mean, the goal of the institution is to fight socialism, not only with this regime, but in the future, because we have to be aware that if we don't fight socialism as an idea, then there is always the possibility that in the future a new leader may arise and start like spreading the word of socialism once again. So this is something that perhaps has protect us from more persecution of the government. Well, you may ask, Cedice has been facing some kind of persecution or in the past of the government. Of course, there are certain areas, for instance, advertising or that kind of things that in the past has been chased by the government, and some agencies has ordered us, to ban some commercials that we make many years ago regarding private property and the defense of private property. But right now we are like more in the institutional defense of liberty against socialism. So we have to obviously be cautious and be conscious of the dangers that work in Venezuela implies. So we try to be like very conservative when we try to make a statement or when we try to represent the institution.
One thing around the world at the moment is the return of socialism as a popular thing for young people. We're seeing especially the rise of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over in the US. In Australia, I think a recent poll that the IPA put together showed that socialism is an increasingly popular thing among young people. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of people out there who are young and believe in free markets, but socialism is coming back. So, yeah, and I guess like one thing that socialism does say is, don't pay attention to Venezuela. That's not real socialism. That's just this, outlier case. We can do better. So what would you say to people that think like that?
Well, that's another thing that constantly arises, because when people say that Venezuela is not true socialism, that was exactly the same thing that we said when people told us that we are like Cuba. And we said to the people, no, because Cuba is not a true socialism. The true socialism is what I'm going to build with this program. And then, well, you're seeing the consequences of what is happening in Venezuela. So there are always like people trying to chase the true socialism. It's like they're trying to hunt a treasure that never appears, because it's like I don't want to call like an ideal or idealistic point of view to make politics, but politics has to be made on earth. So, I mean, by the same token, I always try to warn my fellow libertarians of the world that you must take the politics with the foot on earth. I mean, because it's like if you don't take this into consideration, regretfully, you are taking the risk to stay, in the sky with ideas and not take politics to ground. I'm very sad when I see people of the free world claiming for socialism. For instance, when I come here to Australia, or I have been in the States and in the past, I realize that you have many things that I don't have any longer. I'm talking about rice, I'm talking about milk. I mean, even today when I ate my breakfast, I was like very happy, because there are many products that I no longer see in my country, that I was like, whoa, I was ashamed of myself, because it's like your human dignity is being like lowered, because you are no longer able to get access to the things in your daily life. So it's like I am like Cinderella. I'm here in a free country where I can like walk freely and eat whatever I want. And this is something that you don't realize and you take for granted because you have it. And Thomas Jefferson once said that the price of liberty is eternal surveillance, or you have to be a vigilante of liberty. And I love this quote of Jefferson, because it may sound stupid right now because you have it, but once you lose it, once your rights are taken out, it's very hard to obtain it back, to get them back. So it's very complex, because when you talk of this in Australia or in the United States, you are talking about a hypothetical scenario, and a scenario that is in laboratory. It's not like you're watching this day by day in your daily lives. But me, myself, my family, I and this the history of my life. I have witnesses, people, very close friends that die because of lack of medicines. Taking this to my personal life, I can tell you at first sight that it's not an history of science fiction. It's true. So be careful with the things that you wish, because of course that you want more justice, you want more like opportunities and all this. It's perfectly understandable. But you have to be very careful on how you obtain that kind of justice and that kind of redistribution of wealth, as well as the opportunities that you're looking for. Because from a practical standpoint, socialist policies tend to be not the better way to obtain these things that you're claiming. Instead, look how with liberty and from liberty you can obtain these kind of things that you're looking for. Because on a daily basis, when you apply socialism, believe me, it's not that Venezuelans are special. It's not that Cubans were special. It's not that Russia or the Soviet Union were special. It's a proven fact that you are going to bring misery to a beautiful country. And I am sure that you guys from Australia, you have a beautiful country. You don't want to be facing misery, poverty, and all these kind of things that my country is facing right now.
Right. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners right now who would really like to help out Cedice, or at least follow what you guys are doing. So where can people get involved?
Well, yes, of course. Most of our work is in Spanish, but of course, if you want to get close to us, Cedice is a well-known think tank. Well, well-known. I want to believe that it's like that. In Venezuela, we have a Twitter account that is @Cedice, that is CEDICE. As well, we have our account in Instagram that is CEDICEBE, because it's Cedice Venezuela, so the latest part is BE, as well as Facebook. It has the same account. We have the web page that is www.cedice.org.be, and then you will find a lot of the information and the projects that we are ongoing. Remember that we have a lot of programs. Describing all, it will be very ambitious at this moment. But at the same time, you can contact us if you want to give us, not only money, because money is always welcome, but also, support or engagement, because we have a lot of experience regarding the management of crisis. And, managing a think tank in a country like Venezuela right now is a very complex issue. So because of that, precisely, we can bring you our know-how, our management of human resources and capital to another circumstance. We could gladly do that. And regarding the funding, because of the situation is more complex, we will prefer to direct peer-to-peer provide information regarding that subject, because financing on foreign currency to NGOs in Venezuela, and Cedice is an NGO, in the legal structure, is a little bit complex, and that I will further elaborate if anyone wants to donate or to help us, because of course that donations are welcome, but it's a complex matter to disclose it in the podcast right now.
Right. All right. So Andres, thanks so much. That was awesome. Like I said last night, I am never going to be able to put myself in your shoes. I just don't know what it's like to live in a country like that. But, it's good to know that there are prospects for change, and hopefully Venezuela can start to get back on its feet again. So thanks so much for coming on the show, and that was really illuminating.
Well, thank you, James, because, to take the time and to understand and to know about what is happening in the country, for us is very, very, not only lawful, but I'm very grateful because of this. The opportunity to share what is happening in the country, to let people of Australia know, and most of all, to understand Venezuela as a lesson is great, because I care about the freedom not only of my country, but of the world as a whole.
Okay, we're now joined once again by IPA research fellow Kurt Wallace. This is a good meeting of the Hey team, so if you are subscribed to Hey What Did I Miss, these are the three people that will send it out to you. So Kurt, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so you were with me and a few other IPA staff members at the Friedman Conference over the weekend. This is, if people are new to the show and they don't really know what the Friedman Conference is, it's basically Australia's biggest libertarian conference, biggest in the Southern Hemisphere, I think they were saying this year. And there was a whole lot of great speakers. Now, I was, as we've discussed earlier in the show, I was doing a whole lot of interviews, so I didn't get a whole chance to sit on any of the panels. And I know there's going to be a lot of listeners out there who want to know what people were thinking about at this conference. So we've got Kurt here with us. So, Kurt, first off, you were in your own panel.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about what that was about and what the experience was? Because I know there was a big celebrity with you.
Yeah, so I was on the panel on labour markets and unions and work, and I was speaking on the UBI proposal, so that's the Universal Basic Income, basically a no strings attached welfare payment to everybody.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so I was talking about that and the living wage concept and speaking about the philosophical underpinnings of those two policy ideas. So I was talking about the idea of positive rights and inequality, a lot of things on the left, particularly that argued for those two policies. And then, and I was on the panel with...
well, actually, just on that, so let's discuss UBI, because it's a pretty interesting area, and we had Andrew Yang, who's a Democratic Party nominee, calling for it as well. It seems to be getting a whole lot of groundswell. So what is the UBI, if people don't know, and then what's your take on it?
Yeah, so there are a number of the Democratic field, very wide field. A number of them are putting forward the UBI as a way of, there's a few different ways of proposing it. So on the left, there's been a number of rights-based cases saying that everyone deserves a basic standard of living, so they should be provided this lump welfare payment direct from the government. There has been also like a libertarian case saying that we can sort of replace the existing welfare system and reduce bureaucratic waste. But Andrew Yang's one of the candidates in the Democratic race who's sort of proposing it as a way of adjusting to increases in AI that will, take people's jobs and make some people unable to earn a wage, according to his view. So the idea is that you'd have this some lump payment from the government that provides a base for you to live off, and then but there's very vague proposals put forward, so it's very difficult to sort of just nail down the problems with proposals when the people putting it forward are very vague on the details.
Yeah, because a whole lot of people do talk about the growing automation of the industries, but it does seem to be like there's always been automation, there's always been industries that aren't relevant anymore, and we just find new industries to put people into.
Well, exactly. If you look back, like there's been very radical changes in technology and industrialization, and we've managed to cope in the past. And I think there's a good argument to say that we will, in the future as well, people will move into areas where they're more productive and ultimately will benefit from improvement in technology.
So you're on a panel with Sir Roger Douglas, a famous New Zealander. Was that a thrill? Why don't you explain what he did and how that was?
Yeah, so that was really good. So he was on the panel, and also he had his own keynote that I went to. So he's a famous politician in New Zealand. He was part of he was the finance minister in the 1980s for the Labor government that enacted a number of key market reforms as part of sort of the global, in the Anglosphere, this sort of move towards free markets under Thatcher and Reagan. So he was a really important guy in the Labor government in the 80s that removed a number of subsidies, floated the currency, enacted a number of key market reforms that ultimately spurred on and influenced people in Australia as well.
Do you think you'll be a Sir one day? You have to say yes or no.
No.
Okay.
Oh, all right. That's a bit negative thinking if you ask me. So let's talk about some of the other panels that were there. So there was the IPA's first live podcast, which was one of the sessions. They've yet to ask me and Pete go live. I don't know quite why.
I can't understand why.
Yeah, I think it's something to do with unprofessionalism, but we'll get into that later. We're not going to have you justify why that was. But anyway, so the IPA's Looking Forward podcast. Go out and subscribe if you haven't already, but they did a live recording. It's going to be coming out in the next few days. So how did you find that? Because that was about the future of freedom. Like, what's freedom going to look like in 2050? What are the debates we're going to be having?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. Had a good live audience in. Had Renee Gorman and Chris Berg, John Roskam and Scott Hargraves. So had a good discussion on what their view of the future of arguing for liberty in the future. And they all took fairly positive, optimistic views of how we can progress, how we can find like how technology can help us sort of move beyond the state regulation and enable us to argue for freedom in that way. And a lot of positive talk about like the role of the internet in spreading ideas. So it was really a really good talk, and it was good to be in the room and have questions asked from the audience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. So you went through a lot of, what are they called, panels and stuff and presentations over the course of the conference. What was your favourite?
There was a number of really good panels and a lot of like diversity of thought. One of the really interesting one was called Leaving the Left. There was I think it was 3 ladies speaking about how who came from various backgrounds and saying how they left the regressive left and now have moved to sort of various positions. But so we had Bindi Cole Cocker, who some of the listeners might have heard her story. So she came from a really rough background and was involved in sort of like the art world in Australia. And like she was telling the story about how she sort of got famous by being involved in this sort of social justice warrior art scene. But then she had a sort of an about-face turn where she converted to Christianity and sort of embraced like a conservative worldview. So she sort of told the story about how the social impact of that, like amongst her friends, amongst the art world, where her work really dried up because of...
Really?
Yeah. So
she's an apostate. She left the religion, so they've got to reject her.
Yeah, exactly. And another interesting one was from a lady who is an ex-Muslim, and she was saying that she was like raised a Muslim in a Muslim family, and then she left Islam and embraced this sort of radical leftism, and then sort of realized that she had traded what she defines as one cult for another cult, and then sort of comparing the social impact of leaving both of those things when she realized that the radical left were not open to ideas, were not what she called free thinkers. So that was really interesting to hear.
Yeah, cool. And I know there was another panel which was interesting to hear, but it wasn't especially good. And that's not to take away from the Friedman Conference, but it just happened to be that there was one particular member of the Labor Party who didn't really seem to pick up on the right lessons to take from the last election, you were telling us.
Yeah, so there was Sam Crosby, who was a Labor candidate for Reid in Sydney, and he was, I assume when they organised the conference, they assumed that he would, win his seat and be in the parliament, and also that he'd be part of the government, so part of under a Labor victory. So it was interesting it was good for him to front up to a libertarian conference, which I think didn't have a lot of support in the room. But I ultimately didn't really agree with his assessment of the election that happened and why Labor lost the election. He sort of argued that the reason that they didn't win is because they didn't argue for their key policies, like putting solar panels on schools, which I don't think that's a winner.
That's what swayed Queensland.
Yeah,
in my
I don't
books.
think
They would have tipped it over the edge.
that's a good thing to say. You've got to vote for us, or you won't get your solar panels on your local school. So I don't think that's it. And then and he brought up the issue of religious freedom and how that was ultimately one that Labor had difficulty in persuading the electorate of. So that was interesting because his seat is an interesting one because it has a lot of affluent areas, but also as you move west, it sort of moves into areas that were very high no voters in the same-sex marriage plebiscite. So it was interesting to hear his sort of his take on that.
So is he Labor right or Labor left?
He's from Labor right.
Yeah, so if you've got a Labor right guy saying we didn't exactly put our climate policies hard enough, like Labor Party's in a really weird position then.
Yeah, so the other issue which I disagree with him strongly on was talking about energy and Adani. He was maintaining an anti-Adani perspective, anti-nuclear energy.
Yeah, sorry, Pete.
Come on, mate.
Didn't want to open these things up to the market. He was saying, that he doesn't think the nuclear and because nuclear takes 20 years apparently to build, which I dispute as well. So I don't really agree with him on energy. And what struck me was that if he's coming from Labor right, you sort of wonder, is there anyone in the party room who's actually going to be putting forward what I think was the disaster for the Labor Party, which was their anti-industry, anti-coal line, which ultimately cost them the election in Queensland. But if no one's putting forward the argument there, you sort of wonder what's going to happen.
ScoMo's going to be top dog for a long time.
Yeah, well, ScoMo, I think he has a real opportunity to really build on this victory, and Labor really need to get their act together.
So one of my absolute favourites, Jacinta Price, she's been on this program a couple of times. You said her presentation was pretty good. She spoke about challenges in the NT and issues for Indigenous people. How was her presentation?
Yeah, so she was on a panel with Amanda Stoker and Tim Wilson talking about the future of the Liberal Party, and she spoke to the issues of the Liberal Party, the Country Liberal Party in the Northern Territory. It was really interesting hearing about. So her seat that she was running for, which she unfortunately didn't get over the line in, basically takes up all of the Northern Territory except for Darwin. So there's a lot of remote areas, but obviously sort of centralised in Alice Springs. So she was speaking about like the challenges in really putting forward the case to a number of like Indigenous Australians who a lot of them really embrace the ideas of liberalism and like standing on your own feet and believe in improving the culture and societies there. But she was sort of speaking about like some of the institutional things where a lot of Indigenous Australians sort of just default vote Labor. There's a lot of people in those areas that are sort of putting forward like the Labor message. So it's very difficult for someone to come in and put forward the ideas of liberalism and freedom. And I think she's done a very good job, and I think she's going to push on and try and have another crack at it by the sounds of things.
Well, that was my next question, because I think a lot of our listeners would probably be interested about what she plans to do next. Did she mention what her plans were now that unfortunately she didn't get up?
Not specifically, but by listening to her, she seems like very committed to putting forward these ideas and really helping her people in the Northern Territory. So I think that she will probably continue and try and make more headway there.
All right, cool. So you went to a whole lot of panels. It was a really great conference. You spoke at one. What would be basically your main takeout? Like, what was a big theme of the panel? What are you walking away thinking?
Good question.
Yeah, well, I think...
Thank you, Pete.
I think it was just really good to meet a whole range of people from the libertarian movements, a fair diversity of opinions there. You have more like libertarian and also conservatives and everything. So it's really good to sort of meet people, get an idea of the different views out there, and also get an idea of what other people are doing in the liberty movement, the institutions they come from, and the way that they're arguing for liberty. And I think it was really good to hear sort of a positive message about how we can sort of expand our audience and sort of put forward the ideas of liberty through sort of telling the stories of freedom and appealing to people's desire to be free and to I think that's people's desire to be free is something that we can really take into to expand our views.
You've done a fantastic job, Kurt. Not only have you summarised your own presentation, you've summarised half a dozen other ones, which is always tough. Now, I want to know about the off-field side of the conferences. I know there's a lot of events and functions. What was the off-field highlight?
There was a number of events afterwards at night. So we had the gala dinner, but also a really nice Sydney Harbour cruise, which was in time for the Vivid conference, which is like for Melburnians, that's the same equivalent to our White Night, I believe. So Sydney was all lit up, the bridge was lit up and everything. So perfect 25-degree night. So it was really.
Yeah, I wasn't there, so I'm really struggling with this one. Big FOMO. I messed up my flights. I thought, like, all right, I'll get all my podcast interviews done. I'll be back in Melbourne, and then found out that the Bruce Cruise was Saturday night when I was in rainy old little Melbourne, seeing all the photos from people from the conferences.
Yeah,
it was. I messed this one up.
Yeah. No, it was really good. And then, coming back, getting off the flight in Melbourne, hit by the big wind of cold. So
best on ground.
Best on ground. Well, I'll have to give that to, like, from the speaker's perspective.
Off-field.
It's Peter Gregory. What do you think he means?
Yeah, well, actually, no, that's good. Who's the best speaker and who was best on ground off-field?
Pete tries desperately to claw back some respect.
No, I'm interested in both.
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask for the best on ground in terms of the nightlife.
Yeah, Kurt's a dad now, all right?
Yeah,
he needs
I'm
to,
a
those days are
responsible-
behind him.
Come on, Kurt. Who are you
I'm
protecting?
No comment on that. No, but in terms of the conference, I think, I don't really know who was the best, but the ones I really enjoyed hearing Sir Roger Douglas, because learning about what went on in New Zealand, I think the guys are really worthy of our respect, and it was really good to hear what he was thinking, and he's sort of still putting forward ideas for how to improve and advance in opening up markets and smaller government and putting forward the ideas of liberty. So I'll give Sir Roger Douglas best on ground.
All right, the medal's in the mail to him. All right, Kurt, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, thank you to Andres Guevara and Kurt Wallace for those interviews. Now, this has been a long show, but there's been a whole lot of things that have, made us laugh in the last week.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
So we'll fly through them, but also, we want to give them the due time of day. All right, so I'm going to start off with this one. So Naomi Wolf, pretty famous writer, pretty famous, literary literary person, I guess.
Progressive feminist.
People know who she is, right?
Yep.
Definitely.
I'd
if
say
you don't,
95% of people.
Yeah. So anyway, she's got a new book out called Outrages, Sex, Censorship, and the Criminalization of Love. And it's basically looking at the history of, gay people, other LGBTIQ people, and looking at their history and how different societies have engaged with it. And it comes back to this heartbeat through the book of, I haven't read the book, it is not out yet, but it does seem to be that a very important part of the book is the idea that gay people used to be executed in England. Now, there's a slight problem with this. So she's on the BBC. We'll play a clip halfway through this. I'll just edit it in later. But basically, she's being interviewed on the BBC, and she's talking about some of the cases, and she keeps on noting that, people that are arrested for homosexuality, it says death recorded. Now, she takes this to mean executed. As she's later informed, death recorded actually means that they were spared. They were spared execution. The entire basis of her book is based on a misreading of an ancient English legal term.
Death recorded. I was really surprised by this, and I looked it up. Death recorded was a category that was created in 1823 that allowed judges to abstain from pronouncing a sentence of death on any capital convict whom they considered to be a fit subject for pardon. I don't think any of the executions you've identified here actually happened.
Well, that's a really important thing to investigate. What is your understanding of what death recorded means? I
mean, that's just savage. And the one guy she's sticking up for and currently talking about in the interview is arrested for a sex crime with a 6-year-old child.
Yeah.
So not exactly the kind of guy you want to be firming your colours to the mast 180 years after the fact and going, this guy should have been spared. Bad look for her.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was absolutely brutal. We've all had moments of that, not necessarily on radio. What I did admire about Naomi Wolf, though, was that she has sort of come out and said, this radio host, I thank him for his input, and it was important correction. Be that as it may, the rest of my book still is fine, and
definitely buy it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so there's a few things to discuss. One, Pete and I pride ourselves on our ability to proofread, I would say. Seems to be a bit of a contest between us on who the best proofreader in the world is.
There's no contest, but that's true.
How does no one check? How does no one go back and read, I really should read up on this death recorded business?
Well, it would have had 47 diversity proofers.
Yeah.
But no actual historian that would say, actually, Naomi, what that means is...
Yeah, that they were spared. Anyway, and the second part is, so if you're the journalist and you have the king hit, you've got the finishing move, death recorded doesn't mean what you think it means.
Well, he was nervous as well, you could tell.
Yeah. What's the go on doing it live on air? It's a lot to do. It's literally I'm going to make you a meme for the next couple days.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming all this way and being on my show. I'm about to destroy you.
That's the game, James.
Is that the game? I think it's the game, but it did get a whole lot of feedback on Twitter. That was a bit unprofessional. You've got to tell her off air.
No, you don't.
Yeah, well, that was the takeaway on Twitter.
I wouldn't go with that at all. I mean, this
Right.
woman's very powerful. She writes books, you know. She's meant to be held account by journalists.
Yeah.
What I would say, James, though, all publicity is good publicity. I would never have heard of this book if this didn't happen.
Definitely not.
And
That
I
is
still
true.
have absolutely no chance of buying it.
But
maybe, at least I've heard of it.
you know about it, and that's important.
So, look, maybe Naomi knew exactly what she's doing.
Yeah. What would your reaction be if, you've got your PhD, it's mere days away, and you're being interviewed about it on radio and the central thesis of your PhD.
I'm never going to be interviewed about my PhD on radio, James. But,
yeah, not that attitude. But so basically, let's role play here. You're on the BBC, you're talking about your PhD, and then I hit you with all of your findings are based on something that never happened. What is your reaction?
Well, I mean, that's unsurprising. Yeah. Anyway.
Really?
Well, no, I mean, my PhD is great. But
Yeah.
look, it is.
I was a bit concerned how quickly you diminished your own titan of work for the
Yeah.
last 5 years.
But I wouldn't, you don't publish it without getting someone to check it, I think is the point
Right.
that we're making. Not that we take enjoyment out of other people's misfortune here
I
on the Young IPA
definitely do that.
podcast. But bit of a clanger. It's
I'm
brutal
definitely
stuff.
throwing down a smoke bomb and running out of the studio, and then they can't prove it.
Oh, so that's what you would do.
I'm already on a plane to Tahiti.
Specifically. All right, well, let's
Right.
move on to the next story.
Yeah, we spent a lot
We
of time
gave,
on
after saying
that.
we're going to fly through stuff, we gave that about 10 minutes.
5 minutes and 17 seconds.
Okay, so now what were we going to do second? The milkshakes? No,
It's
sorry.
up to you, Pete.
Milkshakes is we're going to do fourth.
That's
Second, we're going
this
to
is needless babble. We've got to get through this show. You are time wasting.
Okay, let me put something to the listeners out there.
Okay.
What is the one problem you have with climate change?
Milkshakes. No.
It is because climate change protesting is too white. There's been a backlash against Extinction Rebellion for, wait for it, not being diverse enough. Professor Agwugo Emajulu, I've obviously got that wrong, my apologies for that, a sociology lecturer at the University of Warwick specialising in women of colour's activism in Europe, says there is a lack of representation in activism in groups such as Extinction Rebellion. Kids of colour, another group, have questioned how inclusive the protests were. And the Wretched of the Earth, which is another advocacy group, have written an open letter to Extinction Rebellion asking the group to rethink its tactics and saying that ethnic and minority voices were missing from the movement. So, hang on. Are you telling me that climate change is a white people thing? No way.
Yeah, exactly.
No way.
The second you said it, I'm like, you know what? It is. Climate change protests are really white.
It's the whitest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Well,
Let me hit you with 3 things.
Okay.
All right, and you have to tell me what's the widest.
Okay.
Climate change protests,
it's up there.
the unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt,
Okay, give me the third one.
very popular TV show,
Okay.
and berets.
Yeah. Look,
Which one?
they're all pretty white, but
Yep.
climate change.
Climate change
is
protests
easily
is
the whitest thing in the
extremely
world.
white. I'm with that. It's a pretty good reason to not go to a climate change protest.
And that story was from the BBC, which is, could you get anything more BBC than that?
No.
Climate change protests aren't diverse enough.
Yes, I would expect the Guardian maybe, but
Yep.
I'll settle for the BBC.
Okay.
Maybe the Independent. Anyway, I have got another one here. So, people with an active Twitter account might be familiar with the Krasenstein brothers. Now, these are basically professional left-wing trolls, I would say. These guys got famous off that case where it was found that Donald Trump can't block people on Twitter because it's a free speech issue. Anyway, so it was like these two, a bunch of other guys, Eugene Cho or something like that. I can't remember his exact name. They're not exactly the world's leading professional political thinkers, but they rocketed to fame off this. I think they had like 900,000 and the other one had 700,000 Twitter followers. And their whole thing is the second Trump tweets, they just fire off a reply disparaging him, and then everyone goes like, hey, great job, guys. But apparently it wasn't everyone going, great job, guys. They've been permanently suspended from Twitter because let me get the wording right. So operating multiple fake accounts and purchasing account interactions are strictly prohibited, which is what they were doing. They were buying fake accounts and then using those fake accounts to engage with their main accounts to make them look like they've got more fans than they do.
When you say buy fake accounts, isn't it free to set up an account?
It's free to set up an account, but you can pay companies that only do this, so it's not just you at your desk for 8 hours coming up with different handles.
So you get hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. So the brothers denied they broke Twitter's rules, claiming they never purchased fake accounts or engaged in fake account interactions. Now, this is my favorite part. So our multiple accounts did not break any of Twitter's terms, but it's their right to ban whoever they want. What they shouldn't be doing is smearing our names over and over again by claiming that we purchased account interactions. So they're fine admitting that they definitely set up fake accounts to make them look good. But how dare you say they spent money on this?
Yeah.
Which for me is far more embarrassing because that means that you go, hey, I want you to know that I sat at my desk and came up with a bunch of different Twitter handles to make me seem like a good guy. Don't you ever think I try to expedite the process through payment?
Yeah, I don't get what they're getting at with that. But I mean, look, there you go. It's so what is this? I mean, journos report off Twitter like it's the real world when like stuff like this goes on all the time.
Yeah.
And who knows? It's like I'm starting to come to the conclusion that maybe Twitter is a bit of a cesspit.
I personally am going to miss these two because reading their replies and just people dunking on them is hilarious and always will be hilarious. And their podcast was some great listening for the 2 episodes I could be bothered listening to.
And so
they would just read out roasts of them and not critique them. They would just read them out.
We should do that.
It's incredible. No, but like at least we would stand up for ourselves. We wouldn't just like read out roast after roast and then just move on.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they sound exactly the same, which is incredible for a podcast. I mean, Pete and I do sound similar, but like these guys literally have the same voice.
Well, they are brothers.
Yes.
They were, come from the same household.
Yep. All right. That is that story. So, Pete, take us to another one.
Okay. Well, as I sort of alluded to earlier, I've got to talk about milkshakes. So we started this not throwing milkshakes, but saying that dairy was a 2019 thing, and then subsequently,
dairy's back, not as a form of nutrition, but as a form of missile.
As a form of political protest, we saw Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage get milkshaked, and everyone applauded Guardian. Not everyone, but a lot of people applauded Guardian journos, MPs, the powers that be, etc., etc., etc. At the weekend, it happened to an 81-year-old war veteran who was wearing a Brexit badge during the MEP elections and was at a voting booth. And he got milkshaked, all fun and games until something like that happens. Dom McNaughton was in the armed forces. He had 22 years service. He was left covered in milkshake in Aldershot. He said, I'll just read through what he said because it's pretty funny. Somebody came across the street to the polling station and he gave me the finger. He then started giving me verbal abuse and ran off. I didn't hear the abuse. So, I mean, that's already funny.
So just like, well, I can't be here for when this old man hears what I have to say. I better create some distance.
I just gave him the finger and abused him.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the abuse because I was laughing at him. 10 minutes later, he came back with a milkshake and he threw it over me. I again just curled up laughing. I didn't mind because it was my favourite flavour. Obviously, this fellow was just copying what happened to Nigel Farage. He was in his early 20s. It's very childish of him. If he had an argument with me, I would have been more than happy to debate with him, and instead he chose to assault me. The silly man hasn't put me off campaigning. Heck no, he has
Silly
cemented.
Man. Oh.
He has cemented.
Have this guy run for parliament.
Well, to be honest, he's a lot more mature than a lot of people in the public sphere at the moment. He said, finally, he has cemented the iron will. I'm going to keep fighting on.
All right, so I got 2 things here.
Yeah.
One is, surely at some point after you throw a milkshake at an old man who's currently laughing at you, surely there's got to be some level of maybe I'm the bad guy here.
Maybe I have to stop being like how I am.
Yeah, maybe I need to reflect.
I'm getting laughed at by the 80-year-old who I just chucked a milkshake on.
Like, support Remain all you want. I don't care. But the second you start throwing milkshakes, like, you are not the person you think you are. You're not the brave campaigner for good and justice. And the second part is, what flavour of milkshake would you want to be hit with?
I think this was raspberry, and I think I'd probably go for a raspberry.
Strawberry does seem to be like, maybe it's vanilla. Because like, favourite flavour being caramel, but it'd be too sticky. So I'd like to smell like caramel, but it would be hard to get out.
You've thought about this.
Vanilla milkshake, probably the best. Strawberry milkshake, the stain is hard to, like, it's pink. It's gonna stain.
Yeah, well, this was pink. You could see the photos of this bloke. Are there milkshakes with booze in them? Like, is that?
It always comes back to booze.
But I mean, if you're going to get milkshaked,
might as well get some alcohol out of it.
The fumes. Anyway.
Yeah. Surely there would be a boozy milkshake.
Yeah,
if not,
someone somewhere.
Like Bailey's or something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Last but certainly not least. So Peter Van Onselen, who is the political guy over at Channel 10 and a contributing editor to The Australian, one of the world's great Twitter followers, just a guy that continually bites the trash, continually gets into Twitter stouches, and he's taken a hit in this election. So everyone has eventually retweeted at least once Peter Van Onselen, the quote, "There's no way that Scott Morrison can win it, and I'm happy to have that replayed time and time again to my shame if he does win it." So, I mean, literally calling out that it's going to happen. It's going to eventually happen. But anyway, it's had a new one yesterday. So Peter Van Onselen has tweeted, "I didn't think Australians would have elected Rudd PM, sick," like that's what he said. I didn't think Australians would elected Rudd PM. Didn't think his party would dump him first term. Didn't think Abbott would become PM. Didn't think his party would dump him first term. Didn't think Rudd or Turnbull would make comebacks. Didn't think Morrison would win. Don't tweet that. If you're a political guy for Channel 10 and a contributing editor to The Australian, don't wave the flag of how bad you are at predicting things.
You got to try and hide that stuff.
You got to bury that.
I completely get it wrong all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's funny.
And then he's got the emoji of someone going like shrugging, just like, well, what you going to do?
That's right.
Something better?
Your job?
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, like no one got it right.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, but everyone got it wrong. But
I'm okay with someone saying, I don't think Morrison will win. No one thought Morrison would win. I mean, it's pretty funny when you start going like, play this back to me. Play this back to me if he does. I mean, that's going, okay, fine. But like to go on the record with all of these wrong predictions, just so every one of your haters has got it stored in a very easy to find location to use it against you. Yep. Pretty funny stuff.
Absolutely, making it absolutely clear for everyone.
All right. Cool. That is it for the show this week. So thanks again to Andres Guevara and Kurt Wallace for those interviews. Make sure you try and support Cedice if you can. They've got their Instagram accounts. They've got their Facebook accounts as well. You can go follow what they're doing, which is truly magnificent work. You can also follow Kurt Wallace at the IPA as well. Make sure you're subscribing to this podcast. Make sure you're subscribing to Looking Forward as well. Whatever podcast platform you choose, make sure you're getting the word out as on top of that to friends and family who also listen to podcasts. And if you are not a member of the IPA already, go to ipa.org.au/join. You can join and become part of Australia's leading voice for freedom. And make sure if you're already a member, there's also options to donate as well if you want to support the work of the Institute of Public Affairs. All right. Any final words, Pete? Any final thoughts?
Oh, just have a great week, everyone.
All right. Yeah, that's a good and positive message. See you guys next week.
See ya.
I cherish you.